Welcome to my December 9th, 2025 webinar on the morphic field of matrix energetics. Matrix energetics is a particular form of energetic healing, energy healing, we usually call it, that was originated by Richard Bartlett, who is a doctor of chiropractic and a naturopathic physician. He had two doctorates. Um, and He coined the term, and I'll try to explain a good bit about what matrix energetics is, why it's special, um, and how I got into it, and what a morphic field is, although that's not actually terribly important. But it does give a bit of an insight into how different healers do their work and why one healer has one language for what they do and sees certain things, and another healer will have a completely different language and see things completely differently. Um, and it's fascinating work. I also want to talk tonight, and I hope I remember to get to it, to why my practice of energy healing today is really the fulfillment of my dharma of being a healer. Um, so how did I get into matrix energetics? That's a good place to start. And you've heard the story before, but I'd like to tell it in a little more detail than I have previously. Um, I practiced medicine, as I think everybody knows, for many years, and eventually retired. I was trained actually as a pediatrician. I was living in a community that had very few babies and hence children, and was having more and more elderly people who were having the diseases of aging, which I had not been really trained to manage from a medical point of view. And so I was feeling increasingly out of place medically in the community in which I was living. And I had the opportunity. I've been a long time practitioner of transcendental meditation, and a course was created where one basically devoted one's life to meditating and had a couple of hours in the afternoon where you could do some things to run your life and maybe make a little money. And I'd been on the course for a number of years. A friend of mine came to me one day and said that they had a pain in their arm, kind of like this, vague. Um, and I took some history and figured out that it was a repetitive stress injury from something they'd been doing. And I just kind of went like this over the arm. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kind of went like this. Now I had already gotten a sense in things going on in my life that I was not being bounded by this skin of my body. That was not the outer limit of my existence. And of course, I'd heard of auras and the existence of people's quote fields, that were surrounding them. Um, and I did a program called Maharshi Light Therapy with Gems. I really just wanted to see what it was about. And as I was having that experience of the light therapy, which I had no real things to cure, if I remember. And I was just wanted to see what the experience was like. I had a very clear sense of my extending, my existence extending beyond the boundaries of my body. And I thought that was rather cool. And I continued on this long meditation program for a while more. Then had that experience with a friend of mine, and they could feel when I was doing this up and down the arm. They could feel something happening in them, some sensation there in the arm. And I thought, well, that was interesting. Um, but I didn't know anything about energy healing. I'd heard of Qigong. Um, I got introduced at that point to a particular healing modality, and it was filled with warnings not to deplete one's own energy and not to take on the energy of other people, and how you should do these procedures and everything to take care of your own energy. And I thought this just didn't sit right with me. I thought I should be able to look into people's energy fields and work with them without depleting my own energy or taking on their energy and karma. And so I fished around, and um, I learned about a number of different approaches, by each of them usually under the auspices of a particular person. Um, and they each seem to have their own angle and their own kinds of perceptions and their own recommendations for how you should go about, doing energy healing. One of the things that struck me very early on was that many of the practitioners said you should only, if you're going to do what I do only what I do, don't do other things. And I thought, no, that just didn't sound right. That just didn't sound right to me. You know, all of these different systems are within their own context valid, and I don't know why, if you use this technique and then that technique when you're working with somebody, why that should make any difference. Switch from one to another. Um, and so I picked up things from different approaches. Eventually got introduced to matrix energetics and did some reading. I think I saw some videos. Um, and it struck me that what I was hearing made sense. One of the things about it that made sense to me was that the things that Richard Bartlett said about the basis of energy healing were very much like what I was hearing from Maharishi and John Hagelin, Dr. John Hagelin, a world renowned physicist, about the relationship between quantum mechanics and the quantum field. It's called the all pervading quantum field, and Vedic science, Maharishi's Vedic science, and consciousness, Vedic science of consciousness. And that made sense to me. So when Richard Bartlett was saying it in his own words, I pretty much understood what he was saying. I didn't have any problem with that. And I liked too that he was very ecumenical about it. It's like everything fits. You can do whatever you want to do when you're practicing. He says, what I teach is matrix energetics, um, but you can do that, and then you can bring in other things that feel right to you, and use them where you feel they should be used. Um, Another wonderful thing about matrix energetics, and I think most of you have heard me explain this before, but it's worth hearing it again. It's worth my repeating it again to myself, because it's, I think, particularly profound. And that is that you go into doing matrix energetics without expectations for a specific outcome or even a specific experience while you're doing it. There's simple steps that you go through that open your awareness to the field, or quantum field, if you want to use physics language, or the field of consciousness, if you want to use metaphysical language. And when you do that, you do a thing that Richard Bartlett called notice what you notice. Notice what shows up. Now, when I did this webinar, just recently on communicating with animals, and it's on my YouTube channel, Partnership for Wellbeing YouTube channel. I think you can find it either through my name or Partnership for Wellbeing, written as 3 words, on YouTube. Um, I've got I think it's 130 webinars up there, the presentation portion of them, the what I call group clearing session, where I actually work with people for a while. Those are kept private because people pay to participate. It's only fair to them. But the presentation portions which cover a wide range of topics. And I've looked over that recently and actually personally kind of impressed at all the things that we've covered in that time. So noticing what you notice, very profound, very profound. And basically what that means is that when you're in a self-referral state, a state of presence with what's going on in the world, when you're present with another person or group of people or a whole society or the whole world, when you're present with that, you tune into the vibration, if you will, of that field, the nature of that field. When you're working with people, you feel things in different places, inside and outside of their body, can be in their aura, can be far beyond their aura, this much of them. And sometimes it's indeed all the way from the cosmos, particularly with things that have a strong karmic origin. I may find myself way off in the galaxies, someplace. It doesn't matter where I am. What matters is what do I feel? And it's not an analysis of what I feel. It's that there's something there I'm feeling. Oh, it's that sort of a feeling there. And then what can I do with that? Now, when I'm working with people, a lot of times what I pick up when I notice something is the feeling that is associated with that energy. You might say the quality of that energy. It's easy to say it that way. So the energy brings out different qualities. So you may feel sadness, grief, depression, um, isolation, detachment, that kind of thing. That's just one kind of group of feelings you might feel. And you notice that. I notice that. And I usually do pick up on that kind of stuff. And there's no analysis that's involved. It's there. Is it really there? Doesn't matter. What matters is that I notice something. That's what matters. So I notice that, and then I may find a good feeling somewhere. May have to go out in the cosmos to find it. May have to go into a parallel universe. Parallel universe is something that is split off. So you're aware that you're in one universe, but there's wherever you diverged, there's another universe, and there can be many, many, many of them that have you in them, but you're only aware of the one that you're immediately aware of. And when I do my work, I can bring in a vibration from another universe, a parallel universe, where something very different has happened. Um, there is a movie, and I'm going to forget the name. Closing Doors, I think. Sliding Doors, I think it is. And the doors are the sliding doors on a subway train. And a woman runs to catch a subway. And in one scene, she makes it. She gets on the subway. And in another scene, she does not. And then the movie tracks both back and forth, both outcomes. What happens if she gets on the train? What happens if she does not get on the train? It's absolutely fascinating. And the idea is that she exists in both universes, both realities. And then, of course, eventually they have to come back together. And it's very beautiful. The story is brilliantly written. Um, and I recommend it highly if you want to get the sense of what a parallel universe is. So dealing with that kind of thing is noticing what you notice. Is there a place in another universe where this person is not suffering from whatever it is that's making them unhappy? And oh, there's that vibration. Doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter even exactly what it is. Just bring that in, introduce that into the present field. and then a transformation takes place, and you just feel that transformation. I had a wonderful, wonderful experience in preparation for making this presentation. And I've really looked forward to making this presentation. In some ways, um, all those many 100 and something uh, webinars that I've done before have led up to this webinar, this topic and this webinar. Next month, it'll be different. I could do it again, but it would come out a little bit differently because I'd have more experience. And experience has been very valuable for me. But anyway, I had this wonderful, wonderful experience in preparation for this webinar. I went back to an old DVD of Richard Bartlett from Sounds True. Hopefully some of you are familiar with that organization. They do wonderful, wonderful work. They interview and put together packages of knowledge in various forms for many, many healers in all sorts of fields. And so I got out this old DVD and I watched it. And in it, Richard Bartlett is introducing matrix energetics, and they have clips of him working with people. And that immediately took me back to the many, many seminars on matrix, on matrix energetics that I attended over the years. And they were always, pardon me, they were always very special occasions. There are a lot of people there, often some of them fairly green, but many of them had been to many, many of his webinars and were practicing out in the field and working professionally, if you will. So there were many levels of experience there. And in watching this DVD and watching him work with people, it really took me back to that experience of being in the audience. Now, because I went to many webinars, seminars, pardon me, in person with Richard Bartlett, he became a little bit familiar with me. He knew I was a doctor, a pediatrician, and he knew I was interested. And I occasionally would ask the question, but I would participate in the various exercises that we did to develop all sorts of experiences, basically just opening ourselves to those experiences and noticing what we notice. I'm going to take a drink of water. As I was watching him work with people, and he was demonstrating, well, I feel this, Richard Bartlett often touched people. He was, as I said, a chiropractor and a naturopath, and so his practice was very much hands-on, and he was very good at physical diagnosis, particularly the chiropractic kinds of things that were out of place and in the body and such. And so sometimes he'd put his forehead on people. He said, well, I feel something here, and he'd put his forehead down on their shoulder. And it was a way of being funny, if you will, and distracting from taking it literally. It's like there's something there. And so we put our attention there. And so by putting his forehead there, you kind of like, this is sort of silly, but yeah, he's noticing something. And so he'll put his hand there, and then he'll go, and my other hand will go, and he'll find another spot that he's just drawn to. And he'll go and he'll just do what's called a 2-point. I've got 2 points. I have this point and I have that point. And now I will, in my awareness, see that as one connected expression of that person's energy. And just did it. I just did it to whatever here. And in feeling that, it's really strong. I don't know if you can feel it. Hopefully some of you can feel that. In doing that, a transformation takes place. So you hold your hands there and you feel a shift. And after whatever amount of time, sometimes it takes a long time, but usually it's just seconds, and then something shifts. And typically when he was working with people, they'd be standing up on the stage And he always had somebody with him to catch them because they would often bend over sideways, backwards, do incredible things, and sometimes they'd just fall. Um, After I learned how to do this, I was working. One of the reasons that when I did this in person with people, and always now when I'm working with people on Zoom, and almost everybody I work with is on Zoom, I have them sitting down in a chair they're not likely to fall out of, or even lying down. Some people prefer to lie down, and that's fine. But for me, it's safety because I was working with somebody one time, and I've seen this happen at his seminars. I was working with somebody, and they had scoliosis, and so I just picked 2 points. Let's see where we are. So I had my hand somewhere, and my other hand went somewhere else. And as soon as I put the two hands together, and it's like, okay, one field, and they dropped like a stone straight down. Now I was doing this, I was alone, but I was doing it next to an overstuffed chair. And so I just grabbed them and laid them down on the chair. And they were in another dimension, shall we say, for about 5 minutes. Um, and they awoke and they were fine. Um, the thing was that the effect was very powerful. And so when I'm working with people, they often would they'll say, I disappeared for a while, or that was so peaceful. So they'll have some sense that they were present, but they don't remember anything happening in their experience. They were, it's just gone. Um, and so they can do that safely when I'm working with people when they're sitting down. And I often also, while I'm working with people, get really settled. My head's often down. People say, "Did you fall asleep?" No, no, I didn't fall asleep. I was awake inside, but my body was in this state of very deep rest. But I was very present with the field and doing stuff in the field. Um, so those transformations occur, and you feel that. You feel that. You feel the change in the field. And so when you do this work, you go into it with attention. It's where your attention goes with intention that something should change, whatever the person's concern or concerns are. And sometimes you load them all in. Bartlett used to put them up on. See if I can do that to myself there. Put them up on people's foreheads. Actually, at the anterior fontanelle, which is that's a thing from babies, but it's where the two parietal bones and the frontal bone come together, which is right there on me. The crown is back here. This is a little more front, and so you put those up there, and then you just ask nature. You just go into the field and let nature fix things. You don't actually do anything. And that's very important because it brings us back to that topic about my not using my energy to change something. It's not like Qigong or other directed forms of energy where you, like, see if I can get my hands, it's hard for me to do this because I got a mirror image. So you're bringing energy in with the upper hand and sending it out with the lower hand like that. And the idea is not to use your own energy, but to let energy go through you. But it's all kind of fraught. You have to be very careful with what you do. And people do a lot of times just charging their own battery, so to speak. Um, and that's not really much of a concern for me. Now I meditate hours a day, so I recharge. But I don't feel drained after I work with people. Um, in fact, the work is so amazing that it's quite exhilarating, actually. I feel really good after I work with people. And, I've seen miracles. I've seen miracles. In my ebook, and you've probably heard me tell the story if you've been around a while, that um, one of my first really interesting clients had, pardon me, had autoimmune hepatitis. That is where the body attacks the liver and destroys it. And one of the things about that is that it's very silent. You don't really notice anything until severe damage has been done to the liver. And I think that somebody noticed that she was yellow and she didn't have much energy and wasn't really sure what was going on, but sort of got to a point where she got sicker. But the point was the liver was almost entirely gone by that point. And so she got conventional medical approach, steroids and some other anti-inflammatories and stuff. Um, but she was out of work and, just she was actually in school and she had to drop out of school. Um, and somehow she wound up with me. And I was still fairly new to this. So I worked on her and I met with her, I think weekly and then biweekly after things got better. And very gradually, her liver regenerated. Livers will do that, but not when you have autoimmune hepatitis because the body keeps attacking the liver and destroying it. And I believe this client, I think she was on the liver transplant list. And what they do when they do that is they wipe out your immune system and then give you a new liver, and then give you stem cells to grow healthy immunity without attacking the liver is the idea. If it's successful, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So I worked with her for a long time, more than a year, I think, and her liver regrew. And the doctors went like, "Yeah, well, I guess it happens. You never know. You never know what it's going to happen." They had no idea. I don't think she told them she was working with me, but I was convinced anyway that I had made that difference in her life. And I saw her a few years later. It's already been a couple of 3 years, I think. I was trying to place it around the time of COVID, and I can't remember if it was before, during, or after. Definitely not after, so it was either during or before COVID. And she was fine. She was working and living a normal life. She was just fine. So that was my first big case and very gratifying one. And I've had many, many others. But it was all grounded in that experience of being open, just dropping into the heart, dropping the awareness from them. We tend to think here, right? And you let your awareness drop into the heart, just feel what's in here, and then expand outward without limit. And then notice what's in your field. If you're concerned about a patient, what do you feel? It's just wherever your attention's going to go. So somebody is a client, you notice things about them. Well, there's this and this, and you know. Now sometimes I work a lot with not sometimes I work a lot with the chakras, but I work with more energy centers than just the primary chakras. There's besides the I always start up here. So there's energy here in the crown, and then in the forehead. It's the sixth. Fifth is here. Fourth is in the heart, chest here. Third is in the upper abdomen. Fourth is in the lower abdomen. Fifth is, I'm counting them the wrong way. Um, it's fourth, third, second in the pelvis, or in the lower abdomen, third in the pelvis, and I can't count down. First in the pelvis and out the perineum, the bottom tissues. And then in my work, I found 3 levels of the heart. So I don't really worry about whether it's in the chakra per se. It's like, do I feel it here, here, or here, there? Sorry about that. And then it can be up here. That's not going to stay in the camera. And then even above that and below the feet. So there's wherever I feel anything. And then in the aura, and that can be a very interesting experience too. And then, as I said earlier, it could even be far beyond the body, even in outer space, particularly when there's karma, heavy karma. can trace it back there. And so we work with all of that, and it's just this amazing experience. And when I was watching that DVD, this is kind of the culmination of the thing. I'm watching that DVD and I'm feeling what Richard is feeling, and I'm feeling how he allows nature to transform whatever's going on and make it better. And it was like, yep, I really did learn that. It took me a long time because I was very much a scientist, which means, I'm all up in the brain. And it took me a long time to be able to function without asking all those why questions. Never asking why, just what do I feel? What do I feel? Just noticing what I notice and use it for all sorts of things. Now, over the years, I've added other approaches of a practical sort. Um, and I listed those before. One of my favorites is a very simple one called Ho'oponopono, which is from Hawaii. And Ho'oponopono consists mainly of 4 questions. It's an energy approach, but it's 4 questions or 4 statements. I'm sorry. That's 1. 2 is please forgive me, asking for forgiveness. And now I just forgot the 3rd and 4th. Well, the last one is I love you unconditionally. It doesn't say unconditionally, but it's implied. Unconditional. I'm sorry, please forgive me. It'll come to me someday. It happens more and more these days. I'm chuckling because somebody commented that they loved the movie I referred to, Sliding Doors, and the whole concept of parallel universes. One of the things that I introduced, I got trained in a beginner level, if you will, interrelationship focusing, which came from Ann Weiser Cornell. And Ann Weiser Cornell is a marvelous, marvelous healer. Um, and her work is really terrific. Um, but I use that sometimes in talking with people, but sometimes I do it on the subtle level. I just, if you will, talk to their soul. I feel, what do you feel? Oh, something inside feels sad, and it's located here, and it needs attention. And we just let that expand. We just let that expand. My first experience with this, what I call symbolic processing, taking in a relationship, focusing and allowing the mind or the imagination to run. And it's like having a dream. So I was working with a woman who had been sexually abused as a child. It was pretty bad. And they had lived their whole life. They were 50s, I think, at that point. I think so. Um, Late 40s or 50s. Had lived their whole life timid, afraid, certain that they were going to get hurt. But they managed to get married, and the husband ran the house, if you will, and was the head of the house. Right? He was the man of the house, and she was very meek and just took care of everything. Her life was service, and that was fine, and they were very content. But she didn't like the feeling that she had of just being so frightened of life, and so we had 2 or 3 sessions. I think it was just 2 sessions in the second session. She got into this kind of dreamlike scene that she narrated to me. It wound up being chased by some monster, but she couldn't see it. And she was running, and then she was in a room, and she was trapped, and she couldn't get out. And there was a door that was closed, and she couldn't open it. And the only thing I did, she just basically had the dream, just said it out loud. And I said, would it be possible for you to turn around and face your demon? This is just a dream, right? And so in her dream, she turned around, and what she saw was the demon transform into one of those inflatable. They usually came in the form of a clown. I haven't seen one for sale in decades, but they were very popular when I was a kid. And it was inflatable, 4 or 5 feet tall, I think about 4 feet tall. Usually had a sand pocket at the bottom that kept it upright. So you could knock the thing over and the weight of the sand would bring it back upright so it would stand up. And it was fun because little kids like me, a little tiny kid, would go running up at it and just run into it, right? And it would roll over and I'd roll over and then it would pop back up again. It was great, great toy. And it always popped back up. It was just terrific. And you could just do it over and over and over again, like kids always do. And so she saw this thing and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, but it was a clown. And she just looked at it. She wasn't frightened of it. She just looked at it like that. And then it popped and collapsed. And in that stroke, all her fear, abstract fear, just vanished. It just was out of her. Big exhale. I don't even remember that she cried. She just exhaled and then breathed and breathed kind of deeply for a few moments. And it was like, we're done. The trauma's gone. It just left. And I had one more session with her to just kind of clean up any residual feelings, stuff, doubts, that might remain. It was not much. It was easy to do. I got a report later that she and her husband were having difficulties because she was now her own person and she wasn't afraid anymore. And so she was willing to stand up to her caring but very domineering or self-directing husband. And I had to do some sessions with him to help him deal with his new wife. It was very gratifying. Anyway, I incorporate all that stuff into the matrix energetics along with the matrix energetics that I do, of noticing what I notice. And as I said, I can do much of this other stuff without even saying anything to the client or having them say anything to me. I just go by what I feel. And as I said earlier, I can feel what those pieces of energy that draw my attention are holding in the way of emotions, what emotions they're holding. I can feel that, and I would just work with that. So I use the inner relationship focusing on the energy level. And so everything becomes energy work with me. It's all just energy work. And everything just unfolds. And transformation occurs very rapidly. I just work, feel something shift, we're done. Move on to the next thing and the next thing. And most of my clients they have a lot of complicated stuff. So I have many things to work on in one session. It takes a while. And I'm very thorough. But part of the joy of my work, or the interesting thing about my work, is that I'll take care of a bunch of stuff in one session. And it's like peeling off layers of an onion. It's like I'll clear off one area, one layer of that onion and get rid of it. I mean, everything's transformed. And then the next time they come back, and then there's more stuff to work with. It's another layer to work with. So we just keep peeling off layers. And eventually, the energy field is flowing beautifully. And I can measure that. I have a way of examining that Richard Bartlett taught me. So I learned all this stuff from Richard Bartlett, all these different things to notice and things you can do to help with the transformations and such. It's very, very much the fulfillment of my dharma as a healer. Because I watched for years, you give people medicine. If the problem was simple, like an infection, it'd get better. It would get better. They'd heal. Everything else being equal. But a lot of times medicine was not sufficient. Medicine, diet, even. I learned Ayurveda. Diet, exercise, rest, stress management, purification, all those areas. And sometimes they still didn't get better because they couldn't. practitioner couldn't see into that subtle level. They couldn't bring their presence in an expanded way to perceive what was going on in the field, and then using ways of approaches, if you will, to allow that energy to transform. And to do that safely for the client and safely for the practitioner. Well, I've gone on at great length, and it's time for our group clearing session. Before I sign off, the next webinar will be January 13th, and that will be appreciating prodigies. I've long had a fascination with prodigies, and now that we have social media like YouTube, particularly, great deal of access to the lives, and also been interested in particularly conjoined twins. Abby and Brittany come to mind right away. They were, I think, the first ones that I began to follow from the time they were very small. Saw them appear on Oprah's show. She did a marvelous interview with them when they were, I don't know, 6 maybe. They're grown up now. Fascinating that although they have one body and 2 heads, they're what they call dicephalic conjoined twins. So they have somewhat separate upper organs. Everything down below is one. And one runs one brain, one runs one half of the body motor-wise, arm and leg. The other side of the brain runs the other arm and leg. But they can do things together. And one of the things that I saw on Oprah was they went like this. And they didn't say anything. They just went like this together. It wasn't like one went over and then the other one joined. They did it together. And so clearly there was shared information, even though their brains weren't shared. Anyway, we'll tell stories about prodigies and conjoined twins in the webinar on January 13th. But that concludes the presentation portion of this webinar. I will turn off the recording.